All right, so we've been talking here in the past couple of weeks about first fruits, and when the last class was talking about counting the Omer, the count up to Shavuot, which is counting weeks, and I was trying to get you guys to see where some of this stuff comes from. And just before I started recording, I was giving you an analogy of how this felt to me when I was trying to reconcile this chaos, which was a Marine Corps experience I had where the drill instructors would come in and destroy the squad bay, turn everything over, mix everything up, and then we had to fix it. It was very stressful. It was overwhelming because of that kind of chaos. That's how I see this whole calendar thing right now, because I see so many different groups doing things that are man-made traditions and their own way. Everyone's doing their own thing in their own eyes, right? And some are even pulling doctrines from books other than the Bible. And I'm not just talking about the Zadok people doing it with their Bible, which is the book of Jubilees, but also the Jews, you guys. Um, I didn't realize this at the time when I was doing my presentation at Passover about first fruits, of how the Jews were keeping first fruits and why they were counting the Omer and all that kind of stuff. But I've recently learned some things about why they do what they do. First of all, there's no temple anymore, so they don't bring an albar of barley to wave it anymore, right? They acknowledge the day, right? And I kind of think after the Jews of the time of Yeshua at the crucifixion saw what happened and what the sequence of days was, they probably distanced themselves from the first fruits, especially after the temple was destroyed. And you can actually see it in their literature, in the Talmud. The rabbis started making up things as they went, you guys, and that stresses my soul because the cascading effect that happens is Christians and then Messianics and people down the line start taking those same traditions and running with it. We see Messianic, I see all over Facebook, people that are believers in Yeshua and followers of the New Testament are counting the Omer, which doesn't make any sense to me because there's nowhere in the scripture that tells you to count the Omer. It is a rabbinic mitzvah, and they do it because there's no temple anymore. Okay, so there's no coming with the barley harvest to wave and do it like that. So what did they do? Just the same thing what they did in Babylon, by the way. When they went to Babylon and lost the temple, they started making it up. This is how we get the Babylonian Talmud, right? And then we get the Jerusalem Talmud, right? They started making it up as they went. And Yeshua started calling them out when he's on the scene. Finally, what do we got? An illegitimate priesthood. They're buying and selling in the temple. They're doing all kinds of things. They're making up laws that they don't even keep themselves, right? He was calling out the hypocrisy because it was all man-made, all Talmudic, right? And by the way, Yeshua wasn't coming against the Torah. He was coming against Talmud. Okay, everybody needs to understand that because you see this contradiction between Paul and Yeshua in the New Testament. It's not a contradiction. And Paul doesn't even contradict himself. It seems like it. But when he talks about the law is bad and the law is good, he's talking about two different things. He's talking about the oral tradition, the Talmud, and the Torah when he says it's good, right? If you don't have those understanding of those concepts, because to a Jew, when you say the law, that's Torah and Talmud. And by the way, guess what's on top? The Talmud. The Talmud overshadows the Torah. So whatever the rabbis declare, had one here recently at Passover tell me that Jonathan, it says in the Talmud that the rabbis, whatever the rabbis declare on earth is good in heaven. And so that's why they do that. Okay. And it's no big thing. This is how they changed the Sabbath, you guys. Because the rabbis declared, they got together and said, well, here's best for all of us. This is what we're going to do. That's the truth. And that's how they come up with Saturday. You guys go into research Hillel II. and when he lived, and he was forced to make a calendar that was fixed in time, right? Created a lot of problems, a lot of issues. So, what are you talking about? Let's just look at this calendar here real quick. And this is just one I was having to deal with over this feast time, which is the Zadok calendar and what they're doing. And so you can see what I'm talking about. Now, Passover is the 14th day of Nisan, right here. It's also called a preparation day. Why? Because the 15th of every month, folks, I can prove this with the Bible, every month on the 15th, it's a Sabbath. And that means the 8th was a Sabbath. And that means 22nd is a Sabbath. And the 29th is a Sabbath. Because what? It divides it with 7 days. And you keep the new moon in a certain place, right? Every month, the 15th is a Sabbath. This would be a preparation day. And it's Passover. The 16th day would have been the third day, right? This is also first fruits on Yah's calendar. Now, this is not Yah's calendar here. This is a Gregorian calendar and what they call the Zadok calendar. Now, look what they do here and see why this, because where they start their count, you guys, Passover is not a fixed day. The Jews like to think so because they made it that way, but the Bible doesn't give us a day for Shavuot because we're supposed to count up to it. It has a lot to do with the wheat harvest, right? The wheat's got a lot to do with it. So where we start our count leading up to Shavuot is a big deal, right? So if you start the day here, right here, so they're doing first fruits on this day right here. So look at this. The New Testament tells you that he rose up on what? First fruits. That was day 3, right? So that would be right here. Why on the Zadok calendar? And it's like this on the Jewish calendars too, you guys. You know why? Because they want to keep it the day after the Shabbat. What Shabbat? They don't do this as a Shabbat. What do? Saturday. Right? So, and with this Zadok, they got to get 3 days and 3 nights because they're going to take Yeshua literally because, you know, Yeshua spoke literally all the time. And I'm being very facetious here. Yeshua spoke in riddles and in parables, and he made analogies, but very seldomly was he speaking literally. But the one time that he says, you know, just like it was with Jonah in the whale, 3 days and 3 nights, so it'd be likewise, right? It'd be sort of like that, right? He didn't say literally like that. Everything indicates it was the third day, right? That would be the 16th. First fruits on this calendar right here, as you see it way down here, you see how many days they got to first fruits? And then they start counting up into Shavuot. And this is just one calendar, you guys. What I learned from this rabbi today is even early in the beginning, when the temple was destroyed and the rabbis are starting to make up these rules again, and they're counting omers and all that kind of stuff. Do you know they had 4 different ways that they were counting to Shavuot because they could not agree? They could not agree. And so that blows my mind. We got just as much confusion today as they did back then, you guys, on this calendar. And I think to myself, you know, I'm not a learned man. I didn't go to seminary, and you know, I've studied a lot. I've put a lot of study. This book, I've read more than any book in the world. Thousands and thousands of hours of studying the Bible. Okay, but I'm not a learned man. I didn't go to, you know, and learn all kinds of things in a college and got taught doctrines and you know, got indoctrinated, especially not to the level of the head rabbi, who can't even read between the lines. I thought to myself today, who am I? Who am I, y'all, that you would reveal this to me? And this guy don't even know? And he's the head rabbi? Well, he might know. I mean, he knows a lot, but they're willing to change the rules and do things differently because it's just easier. You know, make it up as you go. If you don't have a temple, What do you do from that point? Well, we just start making stuff up. And that's what they did. So let me just kind of segue over to him. Now I'm going to have to stop him every once in a while to explain what he's talking about, because sometimes he goes from speaking English, and he speaks perfect English. He doesn't have a Hebrew accent, but when he starts speaking Hebrew, I'm going to have to explain to you what he's saying there. And so that's and we're going to interact with that. All right. So Rabbi Sacks, this is one of them. He's no longer with us. He's passed away now. But he is a very famous rabbi, one of the head rabbis in the world. And you can see here the ways of counting time, the Omer controversy. Here we go.
לנשום את האוויר, to breathe the air of Eretz Yisrael, of Yerushalayim עיר הקודש and הר הבית. אוויר של Eretz Yisrael מחכים. It makes you a kind of different person. And this is it. This is the center of Kedusha for the whole world. And please breathe in as much of it as you can. You don't have to hold your breath for the next many years of your lifetime, but the way to make sure the inspiration stays is to share it with others. So when you go back to wherever you are going to, share the Torah, share the Ruach that you've absorbed here in Israel and Jerusalem, and may Hashem bless all you do, and may you be a source of bracha to all who know you. Guys, have you all got Makorot? Good, lovely. Then you don't need me. I'll leave you to it. I would like, if I may, to simply learn with you one of the famous machlokot in Jewish history, which left and leaves a mark even to this day. And I want to look at it, first of all, on the surface, and then dig deep down beneath the surface. You get that feeling here. In Jerusalem, the further down you dig, there are layers and layers and layers below the surface. And that's what I want to do here in the case of Sfirat HaOmer. Now, you know that the source of the mitzvah of Sfirat HaOmer, we are in a slight time dissonance, because in Chutzla.
All right, so what he's explaining here is he's talking to, where the mitzvah comes from, why we do this. Now he's going into pointing out there's a difference in the way we keep this. I keep it this way. You guys are a week out, and he goes into pointing out the differences. But the key thing is there, he's saying, hey, this is a mitzvah from the rabbis, and you all know that, right? The question is, why are we keeping it different? He goes into explaining that, okay?
We're a week behind you in Kriyat HaTorah. You have just read Parshas Emor, yes? Last Shabbos, and we're about to read it this coming Shabbos. But one way or another, the source is in Parashat Emor, and it's source 1. All
right, now what you hear him doing a lot is citing a lot of Talmud. So when you hear him say the source, now in the source, there may be a rabbi talking about a Bible verse, okay? And then it may be another rabbi that he's talking to, and they're arguing back and forth about what the meaning is, right? So the point of the Talmud is, you see this going on a lot, and they come to a ruling of why they do something, right? So that's what he's explaining right now, okay?
So you should begin to count them.
So this is not he's not quoting the scriptures. This is a rabbi telling you how you're supposed to do it, right? So he's not actually reading Leviticus. He's taking what it says in Leviticus, and he's giving it a rabbinical spin on it, right?
Mocharat Shabbat, on the day after Shabbat, the day you bring the Omer, and they shall be 7 complete weeks. Ad memocharat Shabbat hashviit tishperu 50 yom. You will count 50 days until the conclusion of 7 complete weeks.
All right. Now, last week, you guys, when I showed you the rabbi that was talking about how they came up with the Omer, it was because of it's no longer about grain anymore. Even to this day, they don't care about the grain. That's not what it's about. All right. So Shabbat to them It's not about wheat anymore. You hardly hear him talk about any grains or wheat, and he does mention it a couple times, but very superficially. The point is, every Jew in the room knows that there's no longer a temple and that rabbis long ago come up with a new way and they're discussing that way. Everybody follow, right? So it is understood to everybody that we don't keep Shavuot like Leviticus 23 says. 7 Sabbaths complete and then add 50 days. They only do 50 days. And
So, Jonathan,
yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Hey,
No, please
so
do. Please,
mitzvah,
you guys, if you got questions and you want to engage, do that. Okay, I need that. Go
okay,
ahead.
thank you.
Yeah.
Mitzvah, that is oral law, correct?
Mitzvah. Okay, so mitzvahs is doing something to get into heaven. Okay, so
Okay, what
so
is it? What is the word they use for oral law?
halakot. I think it's halakha. There's I think there's several words for oral law. The Talmud, or when anytime they source something and you hear them say the Mishnah or the Tanya or something like that, that's going to be the oral traditions, right? Which is
Oh,
going to be the Talmud.
Mishnah. Mishnah. Is that what you
Mishnah, or the
Oh, okay.
Gemara, or the Tanya. You might hear them say something about the Mishnah here in a little bit. Anyway, most of the passages
Okay,
most of the passages that you're going to hear him cite are not from the Bible. It is from the Talmud, and it's rabbis that are arguing or declaring something, and now this is the way it is, right? Go ahead.
yeah, I researched and it said that that Mishnah was oral law, which was from the Talmud.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so the Talmud is going to be broke up into time periods because it's a continual thing down through 2,000 years. And so the Mishnah is going to be the Gemara. And so when you say Gemara, you know what time period that was and what rabbis spoke in it. Okay, so it's a complete volume. The Talmud is. It's a huge volume, and it's broke up into different sections. Okay, and you're going to have thousands of rabbis that are making rulings on various things. Again, they give themselves license to change the Torah and make new rulings. And by the way, this is exactly what Yeshua come against when he got here, because they'd been doing it since Babylon. That's why we have the Babylonian Talmud, right? So they were already off track when Yeshua comes on the scene. And what is he doing? He's provoking these rabbis, not because he's being disrespectful to religious leaders, is because they're full of crap, right? They didn't even keep the laws that they were making other people keep, right? And this is why Yeshua, when they were trying to stone the woman, right? And Yeshua said, let one of you without the sin cast the first stone. They knew they couldn't because they were breaking the laws too, right? They were hypocrites and vipers. And so Yeshua come against them. So anyway, back to this. He doesn't openly admit, because he's not talking to Christians and trying to explain to Christians where this tradition comes from. He's explaining to the Jews in the room why there's a division of the Omer controversy between the Jews. Right? We got the same problem today, just in a different way and even more complex and compounded.
And the question arose, as you know, and became a huge argument as to what is the meaning of Mimocharat HaShabbat.
All right, became a huge argument. So now he's talking about, all right, so Passover, Hag Matzot, which is the festival of unleavened bread, which lasts a week, and then you got first fruits the next day. It's 1, 2, 3. It's not 1, 2, 7 days later, and then another day, and then it's first fruits. That's not the way it is. So, but he's talking about how the rabbis, even back then at the destruction of the temple, argue over how they're going to keep it. You know why this is? Because after 300, and these rabbis were mostly after 300, guess what they did? The 15th wasn't the Shabbat anymore. Saturday was. And so some were saying, oh, that must mean Sunday is the day after, which would be first fruits, which would be a week later, right? So he's admitting that it started with the rabbis a long time ago, you guys, with this confusion we got now.
What does those two words mean? The plain sense is what? Mimocharat HaShabbat means the day after Shabbat, which means Sunday. That is the plain sense. But then the question is which Sunday and why, and does it really mean Sunday here? Be aware that
Notice
the
that he's
Jewish
using
year
Saturday and
belongs to
Sunday, right? Because he's on a fixed day as Saturday, even though he knows it wasn't originally like that. But that's not the issue. That's already been settled with the rabbis. The Saturday is the Shabbat to the Jews. Doesn't matter what it says in Exodus 16 and when we're given the Shabbat. He does a Freudian slip here in a few minutes, you guys. It's hysterical to me because he's talking about Exodus 16. By the way, nobody in the room knows what he's talking about when he talks about it, which stands out to me. I mean, if you claim to be, Torah Jews and you don't know the Torah, seriously? You don't know that chapter is where the Omer is mentioned? It boggles my mind. But it's also where the Sabbath is given. He blazes over that.
different concepts of time. There is weekly time, of which Shabbat is the culmination. And then there is annual time, which is when we celebrate the Moadim and the Mikra'ei Kodesh, the fixed times and the holy gatherings. And there are different kinds of time. The annual time, as you know, is a mix in Judaism between the solar and lunar calendars. In other words, the month is a lunar phenomenon. The word month comes from the word moon. That's a month. That's what it was originally. So a month is a lunar phenomenon. The seasons, Aviv, the spring for Pesach, the grain harvest for Shavuot, Tekufat Hashana and Chag the season of ingathering.
See, he's acknowledging, he knows that Shavuot is a harvest of wheat, but it does not matter anymore because they're not even counting all up to the real Shavuot. It's just like the last rabbi said, it's to honor the loss of the temple now. And by the way, when was the temple lost? In Av. When is the real Shavuot? It's around that time, you guys. Around that time. Interesting.
During Sukkot, these are seasonal, and the seasons are determined by the sun. So one way or another, the Jewish calendar is a complex blend of lunar and solar, but Shabbat has nothing to do with either the lunar year or the
Now, I disagree with this.
solar year.
The lunar year or the solar year. He's separating the lunar and the solar from the Shabbat. I don't agree with that. That's where he goes off.
Shabbat is not something in nature. There never was a week in nature. It's a Jewish invention, eventually adopted by Christians and Muslims and thus taken to the world. But the 7-day week, its origin is in the Torah. And therefore, we have two different cycles of time. On the one hand, you've got the festivals, which are the seasonal.
All right, now when he says
calendar.
it's in the Torah, he's talking about Exodus 16, you guys. That's where it comes from there.
And on the other hand, you've got Shabbat, which is a time zone in and of itself, whose source is the beginning of creation, of God resting on the seventh day. And therefore, they have two different time zones. So it is odd to find the phrase Memocharat HaShabbat in a passage dealing with the calendar year. And that is what generated the controversy. So the plain sense is Memocharat HaShabbat means you start counting on Sunday, and Shavuot, according to that, will always fall on a Sunday.
All right, so this is one of the arguments that they have on counting the Omer, right? They start to count after Shabbat, which is Saturday for them, on what day? Sunday. We see the Zadok people doing the very same thing, right? And then they only count 50, landing on what day? A Sunday, right? Was there Sunday at Sinai? No. How do you know it was a Sunday? You don't know. And to fix it when you know it wasn't a fixed day boggles my mind. But he talks about a passage in the Talmud here where that controversy came up. Rabbis started arguing, and they're talking about Exodus 16, and they said, well, the 15th was a Shabbat there. That must have been a Saturday. the 16th was a Sunday. All right. The logic is I don't understand it really, because it's very clear. It's a lunar, so the moon determines this, right? He doesn't even go into it like that.
Question is, which Sunday? The Sunday before Shavuos, the Sunday after, the Sunday in Pesach, or the Sunday after Pesach? But there it is. And the Perushim, the Pharisees,
It's another group
whose descendants we are, said no, there is such a thing as a Torah Shebaal Peh, not just the Torah Shebichtav. Not only is there a written Torah, but there's an oral Torah that explicates the written Torah. And according to the Torah Shebaal,
Did you hear what he just said? Did you hear what he just said? There's an oral Torah that explicates the Torah, right? So they're okay with this, you guys.
Peh, Mimocharat HaShabbat means the day after the first day of the festival. That's why we start counting Sfirat Omer on the 16th of Nisan.
Now this part happens to be right, the ruling on this, but you know what when he's saying about a tradition from the oral Torah and making that statement, that's kind of the point I'm making, that they draw a lot from these rabbis instead of going themselves. And by the way, they say that we're not capable of doing that ourselves. We're not capable of reading Yah's word and coming up with what it means. And so you have to go to a rabbi to get the answer. Okay. Most Jews that sit under rabbis, as you'll see in a moment, don't even know the Torah. Okay. So there's like 4 different traditions between themselves on how to do this. And let me just show you on the calendar that we were looking at just a minute ago what we're talking about.
Is the 15th.
And why this is important. Now the Zadok people are trying to do it very similar to what he's talking about, because they keep a Saturday Sabbath, right? So it has to be the Shabbat after, right? So we're talking about these 3 days, 14th, 15th, and 16th. This is their calendar this year, you guys. I'm just using it as an example, right? So their Sabbath is Saturday, and their first day is going to be a Sunday, right? So that's why they put that at a Sunday. But this particular group is trying to add in, these are not Jews here, they're trying to add in the 3 days and 3 nights. So they go even further and put it, see, they got the resurrection on a Saturday, and then the first fruits, for some reason, they put right here. Complete chaos. It was the same thing with the Jews. The second way he was just telling you was the rabbis had said, no, the 15th is a certain kind of Shabbat, right? It's a rest day, and it's because it's Hag Maksot, it's called a Shabbat Tom, right? And then the next day would be first fruits. Let me show you what it looks like on Yah's calendar. And we know it's not a week, you guys. It's not more than a week. It is 3 days. All right. The 14th of Nisan would have been day 6 of the week. And it's like that every month, folks. The 14th, the 21st, the 28th is always going to be on day 6. The 8th, 15th, 22, 20, and 29 is going to be the Sabbath days. And no, this is not, even though it says an 8, this is day 7 here. Watch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Why? Because we are honoring the new moon. Follow? All right. So if Yeshua is crucified on the 14th, he goes into the tomb there. The next day is what? A Sabbath. The next day is what? The first day of the week. You see that? Everybody see that? Please let me know you can see that. Right? On Yah's calendar, let's go to the New Testament, Matthew 27. I want you to see what happens when Mary. All right, remember that. 1, 2, 3. And the 15th is a Shabbat, right? Where are we at right here? All right, so we see the crucifixion, the death of Yeshua, and when Yeshua is buried. Let's start there. And when it was evening, and there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Yeshua, and he went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. And Pilate ordered it be given to him. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud and laid it in his own tomb. And when he had cut from the rock and rolled back a great stone to the entrance of the tomb and went away, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting there opposite of the tomb. The next day, that is after preparation day. What did I just tell you? 14th day is a preparation day every month for Shabbat. This particular time, it is Passover. It is called a preparation day because you can work on Passover up until evening. Once evening comes, Shabbat's here. Okay? Everybody understand? It's a preparation day. It says the next day, that is after the preparation day, the chief priests and the Pilate and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate. This is on the 15th. And said, "Sir, we remember how that impostor said that when he was still alive, after 3 days will I rise." Notice it doesn't say in 3 days and 3 nights. It says after 3 days. Therefore, order the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people he's risen from the dead, and the last fraud would be worse than the first. Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers, go make it secure as you can." And so they went. Remember, it is the 15th day when they're doing this, correct? Everybody follow, right? What's the next day? What's the next day? Let's look. Resurrection.
16th.
It's the 16th. All right. Now, after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, right? Let's look at that. Is the 16th the first day of the week? I might be telling you a story. Let's double check. Is the 15th? I can't believe I did that. All right, so I close it out. The 15th is a Shabbat, right? We saw that. We see it here. Toward the dawn of the first day of the week, the 16th, Mary Magdalene and the other went into the tomb. It wasn't a week later, you guys. Toward the dawn of the first of the week, that's the next day. That's the 16th. That is the very next day, the first of the week. 16th is always the first of the week. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb, and behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel and Yah descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on his appearance. So we see the resurrection happening when? On the 3rd day, on the 16th. It's 1, 2, 3. First fruits is on the 16th, you guys. Why are some people keeping that more than a week later? Because they're trying to fit in 3 days and 3 nights on the 26th day. And then if you start your count from there and you try to count all the way to Shavuot, guess what? It's not going to be the right one. First of all, you're way off. You're way off. So let's go back to this rabbi. I just wanted to point that out. That's what he's talking about. That week, the Jews even have a problem with that same thing as we do right now.
Of Nisan, and the Memocharat Shabbat, the day after that, is the 16th of Nisan, and that was the Torah Shabbat. So what actually happened was that in Bayit Sheni times, in the time of the Second Temple, Chazal talk about it a lot. There's a whole sugya in Masechet Gittin. But if you really want to understand what was going on, you have to read a contemporary historian, an eyewitness of those times, Josephus. And Josephus talks about the incredible divisions within the Jewish period.
Incidentally, Josephus was, he was after the destruction of the temple, okay? And so the Jews by this time were already only counting 50 because there's no temple to do the Omer, to do the wave offerings and stuff like that. So they were already doing that, right? I saw somebody try to make an argument. Well, Josephus said it was 50 days. Well, you're right, because the temple's destroyed already. It's called sequence of events.
Period within the Jewish people at the end of the Second Temple period. So we had, anyone know what the groups were called? There were Bythusians, Batanim, there were Zadokim, the Sadducees, there were the Esseim, the Essenes. There were a whole group of different sects.
All right, so you might be asking yourself, what is a Bythusian? A Bythusian. Anybody know what a Bythusian is? What was the woman at the well?
Samaritan?
She was a Samaritan. What are Samaritans? Samaritans is a mixture of Hebrew and Goyim, right? That's a Bythusian. It's their word for Samaritan today. Bythusian, meaning a mixture of two. Crazy, huh? How would you like to be called a Bythusian?
And they all had different shittot. In addition to that, since 1947, we have known about the existence of a sect in the Dead Sea, the Qumran sectarians, whose literature was discovered in 1947, the Dead Sea Scrolls. So they were a dissident sect, mainly of Kohanim, who were appalled by what they saw as the corruption of the Kahuna in the temple, and they went and founded their own community in Qumran. So, and there were also other Jews whom you will know from walking around the streets in Israel, the Ethiopian Jews. And the Ethiopian Jews were separated from the main body of Jewish life for many centuries, for maybe 2,000 years. So it turns out that there was not one Shita, but 4 different Shitot as to when Shavuos falls.
4 different ways to keep Shavuot.
Shavuot falls on the Sunday, the 50th day after the Sunday that falls in Chol Hamoed Pesach, or part of the first Shabbos of Pesach. You begin counting after that, and 7 weeks later you celebrate Shavuot always on a Sunday. The Qumran sectarians held that you started counting the Sunday after Pesach, and they had a fixed calendar. So according to the Qumran sectarian, Shavuos always fell on the 15th of Sivan, which was always on a Sunday. That whole Shita, all of them.
All right, so that's what we're going to be seeing here, with some people keeping Pentecost is going to be around, the 15th of Sivan. Yeah.
All right. The Perushim and us hold that you count Sfirat HaOmer from the second night of Pesach. So for us, Shavuot usually falls, well, nowadays it always falls on the 6th of Sivan. That when the calendar was fixed by eyewitness, you had the possibility that the 2 months of Nisan and Iyar were both short, or one long and one short, or both long. So you could have Shavuot falling either on the 5th or the 6th or the 7th of Sivan. And you had the Ethiopians who celebrated Shavuot. They started Sfirat HaOmer on the night of the last day of Pesach, right? So they held Mimocharat HaShabbat means festival, not Saturday. But Mimocharat HaShabbat they understood as the day after the last day of the festival. So they always celebrated it 6 or 7 days later than anyone else. The end result was chaos. So
Chaos.
Did you ever come across something in science called chaos theory?
Chaos, you guys. So he even admits that the end result from these 4 sects coming up with their own way of keeping Shavuot. And it all started from corruption in the first place. When the first rabbis decided, hey, we don't have a temple anymore, so there's no point in waving sheaves and waving loaves of bread. So what are we going to do, right? And then you had Constantine that came along around the time that the calendar was fixed, and he kind of put the nails in the coffin at that point. He tells them you can't keep the Sabbath. And by the way, When the temple was destroyed, they were still keeping the Sabbaths according to the sun and the moon. By the time Constantine comes in 300s, that's it. There's no more counting weeks. There's no counting no Shabbats or doing Shabbats by the moon anymore. And your Shabbat can't be the same as ours. So the Saturday happened, and then Sunday became the Christian thing, right? And by the way, because these are rabbis that are deciding this, it becomes this is now law. This is now the law, and it doesn't matter what it says in the Torah anymore because they made up a new way.
You know the story. You know chaos theory. Chaos theory is the beating of a butterfly's wing in the South Pacific and cause a tsunami in Los Angeles. That is chaos theory. I always thought chaos theory was the theory of Jewish history, but it turns out actually be about science and physics. So you had 4 different days on which 4 different groups of Jews were celebrating Shavuot. And the end result is still apparent to this day. Does anyone know why we keep 2 days Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz?
Because some rabbis decided, that's why.
Yeah, they didn't know in advance in Jerusalem when, had they consecrated today as Rosh Chodesh, or did they wait till tomorrow? Did the Eidim, the eyewitness, come in time, and so on? And you all think that they didn't have technology in those days, that like we have now, instantaneous global communication. They didn't have, what's it called? WhatsApp. They didn't have it. How did we?
All right, so what he's talking about is back in ancient times when there were still people in Babylon and they wanted everyone to know that it was the head of the month, Rosh Chodesh, they would light bonfires on hills from Jerusalem all the way to Babylon. And so you could see for hundreds of miles, and they knew in Babylon, so this was the WhatsApp of that time, to tell them what Rosh Chodesh was. Well, it could be either a 1 or a 2-day event. We're talking about New Moon Day, you guys, right? Then they had a problem of people sabotaging the bonfires, so it caused confusion. So you know what the rabbis did? When they mark the months, they only keep a 1-day New Moon Day, which can cause a problem over time, you guys. It's one thing to mark the head of the month. I see Parable of the Vineyard doing the same thing. They mark the head of the month, but they still keep a Saturday Shabbat, right? And that's because they want to keep their Sabbaths in sync with the new moon. But what if there's a 2-day new moon? And then the next month there's a 2-day new moon. And then later down the road, you got another 2-day new moon. Over time, you start adding, you see what happens? But they make a ruling because of this chaos with the bonfires and stuff. They make a ruling and it becomes universal. We're only going to observe 1 day every month, right? It's the beginning of some confusion here with that.
We live without WhatsApp, right? So that's why we celebrate 2 days of Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz. It's absolutely not so. They had instantaneous communication in Beit Sheni times. And what was it called? It was called bonfires. So they lit bonfires, the first one here in Yerushalayim, and then they had a series of hills on which they had bonfires stretching from Israel to Bavel. So in Babylon, they knew instantly which day is Rosh Chodesh. So even in Beit Sheni times, they only kept 1 day of Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz. However, Mishek Kilkulu Hakutiim, it's when the Kuthians or the Bythusians sabotaged the bonfire. They deliberately, on occasion, lit the bonfire on the wrong day. And if you're the guy on the next hill, you can see the bonfire, but you can't see from 100 miles distance whether the person who lit the bonfire was your kind of Jew or not your kind of Jew. So once you sabotaged the bonfires, there was no way of knowing. And that was when the Beit Din instituted Sheyu Shluchim Yotzim, that emissaries should go out, and it took them time to take the news to Babylon. So the reason we celebrate 2 days Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz is not because our ancestors couldn't communicate fast enough, it was because of disagreements among Jews. So everyone always asks me, Rabbi Sacks, can't you do something about second day Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz? Just abolish it, it's not relevant anymore. And I say, I really will. The day there are no arguments among Jews, we will abolish second day Yom Tov. But don't hold your breath. Okay, so there it is. I don't know whether you're interested in knowing actually who was right on this one, but maybe I'll just tell you on this because it's an interesting thing. If actually the solution to the whole problem of what Mimocharat HaShabbat means is solved as soon as you look at the linguistic structure of the order of the Chagim in Parshat Emor. You know, we have 5 different passages dealing with the Chagim in the Torah. 2 of them are very short, 2 of them appear in Sefer Shemot. You have the 3rd in Parshat Emor, chapter 23. You have the 4th in chapters 28 and 29 of Sefer Bamidbar, and the 5th in chapter 16 of Devarim. And they're all different, and they all use different language, and they have different focuses, different dimensions of the festival. And if you have a look in Parshat Emor, there you will see it's the only parsha in which every Yom Tov is called Shabbaton. Sukkot, the first day of Sukkot is called Shabbaton. Rosh Hashanah is called Shabbaton. Shmini Atzeret is called Shabbaton. And 2 days, Shabbat and Yom Kippur, are called Shabbat Shabbaton. So in Emor, when you see a word Shabbat or Shabbaton, that means festival. It doesn't mean Saturday. Because Shabbat, like Yom Kippur, is described in this chapter only, is Shabbat Shabbaton. It's the only chapter, incidentally, in which Shabbat is also called a Moed and a Mikra Kodesh. It's the only chapter in all of Tanakh. So now, when the Chazal came along and said Torah Shebaal Peh tells us Mimocharat HaShabbat,
now you hear what he's saying now when Chazal comes along and he tells you, right? He's talking about another rabbi in the Talmud that's making a ruling on how things are, the interpretation, in other words, of what the Torah says.
You know, if that occurs in chapter 23 of Parshas Emor, Shabbat means Yom Tov. It doesn't mean Shabbat. Because that's the only chapter in Torah where Shabbat is not just called Shabbat, but Shabbat Shabbaton. Why did it use the phrase Mimocharat HaShabbat? And the answer is, can you see, have I got it here? Can you see source 5? Have a look carefully at source 5. This is also from the same chapter. Can you see? B'chodesh harishon ba'asar lachodesh ben ha'arbaim Pesach l'Hashem. On the 14th of Nisan, in the evening, in the afternoon, it's Pesach to God, right? Uv'chamisha asa yom lachodesh hazeh chag hamatzot l'Hashem shivat yamim matzot tochen. And on the 15th, that's Chag HaMatzot. Do you see what's happening here? We think Pesach and Chag HaMatzot are the same thing. It's a 7 or 8 day festival beginning on the 15th of Nisan. What is the Masechet called, the Talmudic or the Mishnah tractate called, that deals with Chag HaMatzot? What's it called? Psachim, right? It's called Psachim.
Another site,
So
another citing of the Mishnah.
Times we have called Pesach, Pesach, but the Bible doesn't call Pesach, Pesach. It calls it Chag HaMatzot. What is the date? What is Pesach? The afternoon before Chag HaMatzot.
The 14th.
When the Korban Pesach was offered up. And the big difference between the 14th of Nisan and the 15th of Nisan is the 15th of Nisan was a Yom Tov, you can't do any work. But the 14th was not a Yom Tov. You could
All right. So he just told you the 15th is Yom Tov, the good day, right? Yom Tov means good day, the Shabbat. The fifth, he's saying this is a different, the rabbis are just because they have a Saturday Shabbat, they're saying the 15th day and this particular feast, and it happens again at Sukkot time, which are high Sabbaths, right? Is a different kind of Sabbath. Shabbat, Shabbaton. They're coming up with these different terms, right? But we know from how it's laid out in Exodus 16 that the moon has something to do with it, and the days are outlined there, and it's a repetitious thing every month, right? It's the same thing every month, every month, every month. It's the 8, 15, 22, 29, and you're keeping the new moons. And this is what all of nature is on. But he's going on the premise, because they've declared it now, that Saturday is the Shabbat. Okay? So that means that the 15th here is a different kind of Shabbat. That's basically what he's saying. This is the rationale and the confusion I'm talking about. We had the same problem, you guys, with all the different groups that we see now, where everyone has their own interpretation. And I'm no different. Okay? I see my own interpretation too. And I'm not saying this arrogantly either, you guys. I just so happen I'm on the right trail, I believe. I don't claim to have everything figured out. I'm still learning. And y'all's teaching me every day something new. But I do believe I'm headed in the right direction on this because I see the evidence, right? And I don't ignore it.
Do work. It's a minhag not to do work, but never mind. Halachically, you may work on the 14th of Nisan. So there's no Issur Malacha. So if the Torah had said Mimocharat HaPesach, we wouldn't know what it's talking about. You're talking about Pesach, 14th of Nisan, or you're talking about Chag HaMatzot, the 15th of Nisan. So we don't know. Had the Torah said the day after Pesach, we wouldn't know. So it tells us Mimocharat HaShabbat, which means in the context of Parshas Omer, on the day after the day when work is forbidden. And that's the 15th of Nisan.
Okay, so we just read in Matthew 28 when Mary goes to the tomb. The day before was preparation day. That's he's hitting on those points. I'm hoping you can see the correlation here between the text. I tend to believe what it says in Matthew 28, that it's a 1, 2, 3 thing, right? And the 15th is always a Shabbat, right? You can see that Mary goes to the tomb after the Shabbat on the 16th, which on our calendar is the first day of the week, you guys.
So actually, the Sadducees and the Qumran sect and the Ethiopian, not the Ethiopian sect, then I take that back, but the Karaites and the Sadducees and the Bythusians all got it wrong. They got it wrong. This is not mere tradition. Tradition is clarifying what actually linguistic analysis could clarify. Because Mimocharat HaShabbat, clearly in the context of Parashat Emor, means the day after the first day of the festival. And it's called the first day of the festival because the day before was also a festival, but there was no Issur Malacha. There was no obligation to rest, which is what the word Shabbat means. Okay? So now we've solved the problem. Okay. But now I want to go beneath the surface. We're going to do a bit of archaeology here. Now, can we work out why the Sadducees, the Bythusians, thought that Shavuot should always fall on a Sunday? Do we have any guesses here? Why should every festival be a fixed day of the year, but not a fixed day of the week? Yeah? How come Shavuot is unique, that it has to be a fixed day of the week as Sunday? Anyone know? Anyone think? Yeah? Yeah.
49 days after Shabbat, and they say that Shabbat is literally Saturday.
Yeah. But according to them, why did God make Shavuot different from any other festival? That it had to fall on a Sunday. I mean, our festivals can call it.
All right, let me just interject right here. He's implying that Yah made it to where it has to fall on Sunday. I disagree with that. And again, he's going on the premise that Saturday is the Shabbat. Okay.
Fall any day of the week, they just have to fall on a particular day of the year. So have a look in the Gemara.
Again, go into the Talmud.
If you have a look, source 2. Shahir by Tuzim Omer Matzeret Achar Shabbat. The Bythusians argued Shavuos, they called Shavuos Hatzeret, always falls Achar Shabbat, that is, always falls on a Sunday. Nitpa lahem Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai ve'omar lahem, Shoti minayin lachem. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was debating with these Samaritans, these Bythusians, and saying, Shoti minayin lachem. How do you get this idea? V'lo haya adam echad she'ayu meshivo chutz mizaken echad she'amer patvet kenegdo v'omar. There was one guy who had the guts to argue against Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and he said, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, I'll tell you why Moshe Rabbeinu instituted that Shavuos should always be on Sunday. Moshe Rabbeinu ohev Yisrael haya. Moses loved Jews. So he decided, v'yodeh she'atzeret yom echad, and he knew that Shavuos, when you have some rest, how many days is Shavuos? One day. What kind of holiday is one day? Okay? So Pesach, you get a week. Sukkot, you get a week. Shavuos, you only get one day. But Moshe Rabbeinu was an Ohev Yisrael. Amad v'tikna acha Shabbat shketei Yisrael mitangdim kishnei yamim. Moshe Rabbeinu invented the long weekend.
Now you hear what he just said? Do you hear what he just said? He's talking about these two rabbis that were arguing in the Gemara, and one of them says, "You know what? I got it. I got it. It's because Moses loved the Jews, right? And he gives them a long weekend, okay? And that's why it's on Sunday. And he goes back. He's going to eventually go to Exodus 16, and I'm going to show you the flaw in that in just a moment. But that's where this rabbi, not this rabbi, the one he's talking about, gets this from in the Gemara, okay?
So it's a leader in today's or yesterday's Jerusalem Post. It's now, shall Sunday become a day of rest here in Israel again? Moshe Rabbeinu invented the long weekend. Here were people tired out from 7 weeks in the field, gathering in the grain. They need a break. Come Shavuos, it's only one day. What kind of break is that? So Moshe Rabbeinu instituted, it should always be on Sundays. You get Shabbos and Sunday, a 2-day break, you relax. And that is the reason. The only reason in the entire rabbinic literature where we find a tzedoki or a kuti explaining why Shavuos always fell on Sunday. Okay? That's the only source. And that's there on the surface. You can see it's a Gemara.
Again, he just admits that's the only source they have is a rabbi from a long time ago come up with this bright idea, and because they revere these rabbis, they say, you know what, he knows best. And that we know that when the rabbis decide on earth, it's in heaven. It's good in heaven, right?
In Menachos, I want to go a little deeper here. What was Sfirat HaOmer? It was the counting of the Omer, which was the first sheaf of the barley harvest. Where else in the Torah do we find the word Omer? There's only one other place in the whole Torah where we find the word Omer. Anyone?
I want you to pay attention to this because he's talking to a room full of learned Jewish men, okay, that know the Torah, supposedly know the Torah. Not one of them. One has an answer, but it's wrong. But not one of them know what he's asking right here. That boggles my mind.
No. Yeah. What? Yeah. Yet there's the same root appears in the story of the binding of sheaves and the 11 sheaves bowing down. But the actual word Omer appears in connection with the manna that fell. If you have a look in that text, which I've brought for you,
Exodus 16,
which is from the 16th chapter of Shemot, you will find in that chapter where the people are complaining about the food. I have to tell you a little story here.
All right, you guys. Now he goes off on a tangent about food, and they were complaining. They were grumbling by the time they get to Elim, and they're running out of supplies and stuff like that. But he goes into talking about a Chinese guy that he met, and he starts talking about Chinese food and kosher Chinese, and he goes on this long story. So I'm going to kind of overlook that for a moment and focus on what he's talking about here. Exodus 16. Now, why is he pointing this out? Other than the source that he gave from the Gemara, talking about, how you count the Omer and how you get up to Shavuot and all that kind of stuff. And all the sources he's given is from the Talmud, right? He mentions this chapter talking about the manna. And this is where we get Omer. This is where you see where any Omer is being, they're not counting Omers, by the way. They're collecting Omers every day. It's a measurement, okay? It's a measurement, and it's not to commemorate a day. We don't see that in the text at all. Let's just go there real quick, because I want you to see this. He kind of blows through this. He does say the word Sabbath and Shabbat, but he quickly corrects himself. It's a Freudian slip that he does, and I'm trying to wrap up quick because I know we're running a little bit over. It's a Freudian slip, talking about that particular chapter and what it means, and he tries to make it into a story about the complaining of food, and that Yah gives them manna, and he makes this connection between they were eating matzah, which is the bread of affliction, and now they're moving into the bread of deliverance, is what he goes into. But what we need to get from this is that we see on the 15th day of the second month, they arrive here. Okay. And we're going to see this in Exodus, this pattern where this day is brought up. And we see every time this day is brought up, they happen to be resting. Yah is just now giving them the Sabbath, you guys. Okay. This is when the Sabbath was given to man, right here. Okay. And it happens. It's interesting that it's on Exodus 16, and then the first place you see Sabbath is verse 22. Okay, so just to kind of summarize what's going on up here is they're complaining. Yah gives them, quail in the evening, but he also makes a deal with Moses and tells them, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to test the people, and we're going to give them manna. And they're going to collect manna every day for 6 days, and then collecting twice as much on the 6th day and resting on the 7th day, right? Mind you, it's the 15th when this is said, right? So at the evening of the 15th, before they're even getting any manna on day 1 of the work week, which is going to be the 16th day of the week, okay, of the month, excuse me, that's when they start collecting mannas. And it came to pass that evening, the quails came up and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay around about the host. And when the dew was gone up, behold, the face of the wilderness there lay a small round thing, as small as a hoarfrost on the ground. And when the children of Israel saw it, they said to one another, it is manna. For they risked not what it was. And Moses said unto them, this is the bread which Yah has given to you to eat, and this thing is which Yah has commanded. Gather of it every man according to his eating, an omer for each man. So they're collecting a measurement. Now this is the only time you see omers, other than when the sheep is brought to the high priest. That is a omer of barley, one clutch of barley in his hand. It's called an omer. It's a measurement. But we're not doing that. We're collecting manna, an omer, a handful of manna every day, according to the number of your persons. Take every one man for them which are in his tents. And the children of Israel did so, and gathered some more, some less. And when they did met it with an omer, he that gathered much had nothing over, and he that gathered little had no lack. They gathered every man according to his eating. And Moses said, let no one leave of it until the morning. Notwithstanding, they hearkened not unto Moses, and some of them left it until morning. And it bred worms and stank. And Moses was wroth with them, and they gathered it every morning, and every man according to his eating. And when the sun waxed hot, it melted. And it came to pass that on the 6th day, now look at this. All right, so if we get to Elim on the 15th day, and we're resting, right? That was in part that I didn't read there. They're resting. You guys can see this? Can you see this calendar? I'm taking it that you can. Nobody's answering me. So they get there on the 15th. And y'all gives them the command. You're going to collect manna for 6 days. Collecting twice as much on the 6th day and resting on the 7th. So that starts on the 16th. The first day of the week of this week is the 16th. So they're collecting manna all week long, twice as much on the 6th day, and what? Resting on the 22nd. And they do that over and over again, keeping the new moon. So let's go back to the text over there. They're doing this from week to week, month to month, Sabbath to Sabbath, new moon to new moon. And it came to pass that on the 6th day, look, verse 22, the very first Sabbath observed. I don't think that's coincidence there. And it came to pass that on the 6th, sorry about that, you guys. Time of night, where the internet drops out. So they're gathering. Sorry about that.
I can hear you now. I understood what you said, but I didn't understand your question.
Is that to me?
Yes.
I don't remember asking a question. My internet dropped out, you guys. I was talking about the 6 days of the Sabbath, 6 days and then resting on the Sabbath, right? So we looked at the month there, saw that they got there on the 15th. They're working for 6 days and then resting on the Sabbath. That is going to be the 22nd day. And this happens week to week, month to month, Sabbath to Sabbath, and new moon to new moon, right? Now the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, doesn't say it's a Saturday, and it doesn't say it's a Sunday, but this rabbi that he was talking about says because of this, and they believe that the 7th day was a Saturday, right? The 15th would have been a Saturday here, and that the 16th would have been Sunday. This is the same conundrum they have with what we just learned about at Resurrection Week, where they're trying to determine where first fruits is. And it's 4 different ways that they're going on that. It's just as much confusion as we see with the Messianic people today. It's just as bad. Very depressing, actually, to see, because a lot of these people are getting their information from the Jews, from the rabbis. And by the way, I love Jewish people. I love the rabbis. I love talking with my friends, and I have a good friend that's a rabbi, to kind of glean some information and learn something from them, learn their perspective. And that way I can reconcile some of the things that don't make any sense, like this here. So that's all I'm going to play for his presentation there. He does go a little bit further into it, but I think you get the point. They got no problem with changing the calendar, and it's all about convenience now. And that's the way it was in the time of Constantine, when Hillel II changed it to a fixed day of Saturday. It was a convenient thing, okay? And it was done under distress from the Catholic Church and forced the Jews to do it. It's just a thing now. And, what's sad is many rabbis that I talked to and learned, these guys that have been around the block and read some stuff, they know what it was. They even tell you that, and that's probably why our calendar's off like 230 years. Well, it's because these days accumulate over time. And so the calendar gets off, right? And they admit that. So, we can't go to the Jews all the time for the answers. They might have some concepts and some precepts and things like that we can glean, but to go to them for counting the Omer or going to the Dead Sea Scrolls to get doctrine that is just made up, completely made up, and speculation, to no end. It's very dangerous. And I see that all over the place. And like I was saying earlier in the class, it's a little bit overwhelming because I feel compelled to try to do something about it and try to, fix it, but I know I can't. So it's just very frustrating for me. Not everybody's going to agree. Not everybody's going to see it that way, and I have to accept that. But it does bother me because I know the key to the upper room experience was one mind and one accord. And if we're all over the place and we're arguing and they're doing it way over here another week and that week over there and another month here, we're everywhere. That's not unity, and that's not an upper room kind of atmosphere. Does that make sense, you guys? If we're going to get to the place where he pours out his spirit like in the upper room, they were in one mind and one accord and knew what was going on. So I'm praying that we can get there. You guys got anything before? Are you raising your hand, Leanna, or are you just agreeing? I saw a hand or something.
I was agreeing with
Oh,
you. Agreeing with you.
very good. All right. You guys got anything to add before I close out tonight? Nope. Okay. All right. So at some point I want to cover the book of Jubilees.
I have a quick question. This is
Yes.
so I go and I try to look on the moon phases on the internet
Mhm.
when the moon phases are, and the problem is we don't have those bonfires
Yeah, I know.
and so even when we try, we could be wrong.
You're right. And for those that are trying, you're on the lunar solar. Here's what I see. You're either 2 weeks off or you're within a day. And why I say that is because some people keep the new moon as the full moon, so they're going to be 2 weeks off. And the other ones, depending on how they keep new moon, whether it's conjunction or first sight of the sliver, you're going to have a day off. And Marty, you've probably seen this with World's Last Chance and different groups. They're going to be like a day off sometime in some of their observations. That is the thing. And we're still trying to focus this. If we can imagine looking through a scope or through binoculars and it's kind of fuzzy, we're still trying to, focus in and get it real sharp, right? So we're at that point where we can see through it, we can see the object, we just don't have it focused really well. That's where I see the lunar solar people. They're just kind of, again, doing their own thing. Every man's right in their own eyes. Even the observation of how to do the new moon, full moon or no moon, right? So the devil's in the details on this stuff, you guys. The bottom line is he's the father of confusion. There's a reason why he doesn't want you to know and don't want you to keep what Yah has ordained, especially this day called Shavuot. Can you imagine? Shavuot's the day that he poured out his spirit. That probably really made the devil mad, right? When that happened. 3,000 are added back to the kingdom. By the way, 3,000 were lost in the time of Moses, so it was like an offset there. Amazing parallels too in this whole thing. The devil don't want you to know it, and so he's got it obscured. Now, obviously, the Father has allowed it to happen, but yeah, here we are in this conundrum. We're trying to reconcile these things. I think it's part of the experience that I was thinking today, why does this matter to me so much? Why I feel like it's almost an obsession when it comes around every year to this thing, especially when I'm trying to show people how to reconcile the year and to get the Passover and to get the Shavuot. It seems obsessive. I know it. And I even have people message, Jonathan, why are you talking about the calendar so much? Why don't you do some codes? I asked you.
Jonathan,
Yes.
I find that the Farmer's Almanac is pretty accurate as
Mhm.
far as a new moon.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are resources that we can use with technology. We don't need the bonfires anymore. We can reconcile that with phone apps and things like that. And I got a couple of them. I try to go and, I watch the sunset every day. We look at the moon every day. I like to play around with my phone, and you can kind of point it to different constellations in the sky, and you can see where everything is. You can see where the moon is and what constellation. So I've been paying attention to it really close for the past several years. And
Yeah, and oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And by the way, July 24th, it is a new moon according to Farmer's Almanac,
Yeah.
which is Shavuot.
Yeah, that's when Shavuot's going to fall. Right. Exactly right. Is that a coincidence? And by the way, I don't think that's a Sunday, and it's not going to be a Sunday every year. If that was the case, listen, if it was a fixed day and we knew what day it was, why does the Bible tell us to count? That's because the moon oscillates, and it's going to be either a new moon day or the first sliver. Okay, it's going to oscillate back and forth year to year because of the rotation. So you have to count. You can't just fix the day because you're going to get off. You might be, it's like having a broke clock. It's going to be right sometimes, but it's going to be wrong a lot. So right. So that's why we have to count it. And by the way, you have to reconcile the year that way, and Passover too. It's a count that we have to do, and it's not a fixed day. If you're fixing the day to a Wednesday, April 1st, or whatever they were doing with the Zadok, the craziest thing I ever seen in my life, with putting Passover at April 1st. But the beginning of the year always falls on a Wednesday, because they think they can track that all the way back to creation, and then they just overlook the fact that the calendar's been changed. It wasn't even a Gregorian until 1500s, meaning, we got 7 days in a week now. Before that, it was 8 days in a week. Okay, so how do you reconcile that count? It doesn't make any sense to say it's a 7-day continuous cycle from creation. Every Saturday is the Shabbat. It doesn't make any sense. It's going to eventually, in 2,000 years, it's going to get way off, you guys, way off, just like the Jews, right? If it's a fixed day. So study continues, I guess, until the world finally sees this. And by the way, eventually, obviously it is, because we're required. We can see in one of the prophets that all the nations will be required to come in the season that they're supposed to Jerusalem to celebrate these feasts, right? All the nations, not just Jewish people. So obviously, at some point, we get on the right calendar. So I'm just a working vessel trying to help us get to that point. There you go. Marty's put up a link there for you. Else, what'd you say there? Else it won't rain? Yeah, rain's got a lot to do with these cycles too. The former rain, the latter rain, the rain in the fall and the rain in the spring. All the planting is around that, and so you can't plant things out of season or plant things earlier to get an earlier. If you want to get wheat in the middle of May, you can't just plant it earlier, so that's a fact. The wheat won't come out right, right? So there's seasons for everything.
Quick question.
Yes.
You mentioned the going up to Jerusalem for the 3 days. The third day is I'm brain skipping. Sorry. Do you know
What feast are we supposed to go?
what day? Yeah.
All right, so in the kingdom, and we don't have to worry about this now, obviously, but in the kingdom, we're going to be all going to Jerusalem during the festivals that we're required to go, which is Passover,
Pesach and Shavuot
Sukkot,
and
Shavuot
Okay.
is another one.
Okay.
Shavuot is another one. Shavuot is one, and because there's no temple, they don't do that no more. It's not.
Right.
And so there's a lot of modification to the calendar. But y'all's going to restore all that back, because all these days have a significance, you guys. It's not, and Yeshua is the significant, by the way. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Well, I'm just wondering, do you happen to know which Gregorian day this year that Sukkot starts on?
Sukkot.
You
I'll
happen to know
have
that
to
offhand?
look. Yeah, I'll look
Yeah.
and get that for you. But if you want to know about Shavuot, which is Pentecost, that is July.
Well, I'm just curious. I'm just curious. The the count is, if the count is off and the separation of time is off, I'm just curious of the separation of time between the proper observation of Shavuot and the first day of Sukkot. So we have 102 days between Pesach-ish to Shavuot. How many day count do we have between Shavuot and Sukkot is what I'm going to go count.
Yeah.
That's the reason for my answer.
Yeah.
But just a second.
Yeah. We're going to actually get into that, brother, because you can see that in Exodus, but Moses going up and down and getting the law and stuff, that there's benchmarks in time. So interesting that you're asking me that. That's coming up. I want to show you that, guys, that the count actually is, you can see in Moses going up and down and what is happening. And if you read in the text, because like when he comes down after he's coming down after the oral has been given, he's got the tablets. You could read in the text and see there's a hog that's coming up. And by the way, when he gets down, Aaron's declared a hog, a festival unto the Lord, right? It's actually Shavuot that he's declaring there, but he doesn't know it. Anyway, it all plays in, and if you look at it laid out in like a linear timeline, it all fits. I'll have to get that information for you, brother, how many days it is from Shavuot to, but it's right. If we do Shavuot correctly, Shavuot's going to be in the middle, just like the menorah, and three on that side, three on this side. So it's going to be in the middle. So it's going to be roughly the same as it is from the other side.
Yeah, that was my thought, was that picture of a menorah, and I had considered those verses of having to go up to Jerusalem at the required time, and it seemed offset to me if we're going up one day and then 50 days later we're going up, and then 200 days later we're going up again.
Yeah.
That didn't seem to fit in my mind, and
right.
So it does make more sense for it to be just another chicken in the box, that this makes more sense for it to be later than just a 50-day count. So
that's right. And looks like Marty's has got a date there for September 22nd on the Gregorian. Is
September 22nd. Okay.
Is good.
I'm going to go do some counting, I guess.
There you go. And it might be different on different calendars too, depending on who's doing what from where. So be aware of that when you look and comparing that. There's going to be a spectrum of how people are observing these days.
One other note: when we go over the Book of Jubilees, can we make note of the changed texts? Because I want to make note of that in my copy of Jubilees. I just want to put that in the
changed text in the Book of Jubilees. What are you talking about?
The texts that have been altered by the second writer. You know how they say there are two writers?
Oh, right. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. There's 28 there are 28 contradictions in the book. Yeah. And
if you have an article, you could email me or put that in the Discord. Because I want to go through and make notes in my copy of Jubilees. So
okay. You know what? I have got a PDF. I'll have to get it together and see if I can see it. It's pretty thick. It's like that thick. It is a paper that was written by a scholar it's called The Interpolations of Jubilees. And what he did was he just went through and pointed out all the contradictions, not only with Jubilees itself, but Jubilees also contradicts the Bible in several places. And he just points all these out. And
that'd be very handy.
Yeah. And when you look at them, you're just like, oh my gosh. The presentation that I got for you guys, I showed at Passover, and I got a reaction from a woman. She was a Seventh-day Adventist, and she loves Jubilees. And she told me flat out, she was like, if you're going to badmouth Jubilees, I'm going to leave. And I said, well, I'm going to tell you the truth about Jubilees. I'm going to point out the obvious of Jubilees, and you're free to stay or you're free to go, whatever you want to do. Well, she got up and left. And we had a really good discussion. That was one thing I liked about that presentation. It wasn't one I put together. It's something from Adam Fink, who I had conversations with about the calendar over and over again. And I was also one that confronted him on the book of Jubilees with the contradictions. Now, he was preaching this as Bible and teaching it. And then at some point, he really started looking at it and seeing that there were major conflicts with it. And then he did a 180, which is remarkable because most teachers don't do that, especially if they come to something they figure out it's wrong. They'll just sweep it under the rug and move on. They won't admit that they were wrong. This guy does. And it's the most thorough expose and deconstruction of Jubilees I've ever seen. And I contacted him at Passover. I was like, look, man, I'm gonna show this to my group here, bro. This is a really good presentation. I'm proud of you, man. And yeah, I told him I loved him, and can I use it? He was like, absolutely, go ahead. Yes, Marty.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's a mistake. September 22nd was Feast of Trumpets.
Okay.
I have that as Feast of Trumpets. So October 6th is what I have for
Very good.
Tabernacles.
Okay. There you go. So Feast of Trumpets, that's going to be on the 1st of the 7th month. There. All right. Oh, wow, we're almost at 10 o'clock, you guys. I'm sorry it's so late. So we'll continue the discussion next week. You guys be praying for the class and for the software. We're trying to get this thing put together. I'm trying to raise money for that. It is, completely out of pocket, and something that it's daunting to do that. It's something I've never done before. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I like Elon Musk. I know how to surround myself with people that know what they're doing and get the job done. So we're trying to do that, but it takes funding, and it's not cheap. Okay, so please be praying. You can't buy. Yeah, somebody told me the other day, actually on Facebook, that they wanted to get the Pashida, and they noticed that the website's down for that. So we're this is a must that we do this. You can't even download Code Finder no more because the website's not there, and so we got to get this done. And so it's a lot on me, and thinking about this. This is the other thing that I think about all the time is getting some software for you guys that is state of the art, something current, something 2025 and not 2000, right? So continue to pray for that, please. All right, you guys, let me pray for you, and we will see you in the next class. Abba, Father, I'm just so thankful for each person that is here, Father, and I ask that you can go with them this week, that you would nourish them in your word, that you reveal yourself, Father, that you'd speak to them and lead them in the way that they should go in their walk. Father, if there's anyone sick that's not here and we don't know about it, Father, minister to them in their body, heal them, make them whole. We ask that in Yeshua's name. Go with these students this week. Keep them protected from the enemy. Bring them back at the appointed time. I ask this in Yeshua's name. Amen. All right, you guys. We'll see you in the next class. Shalom to you.